Hey Flomies, today I wanted to talk to you about the 5 signs that you have what it takes to become a good flow arts performer. So, what sparked this? Long ago, I started paying attention to the meta analysis and the patterns and the underlying psychology of flow arts performing because it's not mainstream yet. I want to be able to articulate how to succeed way ahead of time. So, those of you who are really dedicated can take a fast track to reach your goals. And what I realized is there are some inherent characteristics of performers, and then there's some developed ones. I'll talk about a mixture of both, and I'm going to make sure that you can hone yourself to become a performer, or you can look in the mirror and decide if that's what you really want. After all, as a community, we are not actually honest with our performers. Here's why. If you go to a flow arts festival and you look at all the performances, you'll notice that a lot of the performers are community members who everybody loves and enjoys and wants to show support for, maybe because they've safetied for everyone, they are vendors, they are directors, they're hosts, they're part of the local community. The audience wants to support them, so everybody cheering for them is not necessarily for their technical skill on stage, it's for them as a person. And what this does is it conflates the appreciation for the craft of performing with them as a human. I personally really like that this is a thing. I like that we have a chance to honor people in our community and them just doing some basic tricks and flowing and having a good time, and we honor them. That's a good thing. However, if the performers involved don't understand that that same act wouldn't translate to a mainstream stage, then we have a little bit of a problem. And as the flow arts curator, my goal is to make sure everybody understands what actually makes a flow arts performance good to a mainstream audience. And, well, I just want to be honest about trajectory. I'm an amateur performer. I say I'm professional sometimes, and that's when I'm doing my really big shows. But for the most part, I have a day job and then I perform on the side. Most of my performances are tailored to make muggle audiences happy. They're not tailored for a flow arts audience. I do make those combos on Instagram, but most muggles don't really enjoy or even see that content. The stage acts are where musicality and audience attunement, costuming, and things like that really come into play. So, all that being said, you probably know in the back of your mind there are some people who are just destined to perform. They're destined for the big stages. They don't have to work very hard. They just naturally are very exuberant, and their body movements are very exaggerated, and their facial expressions match the music and the vibe. They're good at doing makeup, all those kind of things. I boiled it down to the top 5. So let's jump right into it. The first one is that when you are flowing in a public area, people come to watch and they stay and watch you. Now, there's 2 types of people who flow, right? And then there's 2 types of audiences that form around that. Let's take like a music festival, for example. You'll always see flow artists in the crowd getting it. They're dancing, they're spinning, they're juggling, they're executing tech. And the really technical people are sort of focused inward and they're doing their cool tech. And people will come by and watch and be like, okay, he's doing his thing. That's cool. And they usually just keep walking. But then there's the flow artists who have, like I said, really big body movements and they're exuberant and they're matching the music. And what I found is that crowds stay to watch those people. Why is this? It's because the way that some flow artists move is the way that other people wish they could express themselves. So, for example, if there's like a really funky sort of grizz song playing, and somebody's doing a lot of big footwork and big arm motions, we all wish that we had the confidence to be able to do that. So, when we watch somebody who can actually do it with bright flashing lights, we relate. We see elements of other dance styles infused with prop dance culture, and we live vicariously through them. I'm thinking particularly of like some men who are really good with a single hoop. They've got a lot of exaggerated big motions with their hands, big wide open motions like this. And people love to watch that. It's very expressive and it's full body. But if you look at the poi spinners who do kind of like a lot of tangles and tech and like, stalls and like glow stringing style, people just don't stay as long. It looks like a computer coder making a really cool light show rather than a human expressing like a tribal deep level exuberance. So I wrote, this taps into a psychology concept called attentional capture. Humans are constantly scanning their environment for novelty. If what you're doing is interesting enough, people will stop, but the key test is whether they stay. Anyone can get a glance, but performers hold attention. What street performers call this is building a circle. And I've actually tried busking before. I took my brightest 3-poi out there, my big pixelated ones. I was juggling them. I was doing all sorts of cool weaves and like what I would consider to be tech. But I didn't have a show around it. So people just walked by. They're like, yeah, that's cool. And then conversely, I've seen street performers typically in like South America and Mexico where they'll just have like 3 basketballs or even just 3 daytime clubs, and they'll be juggling and they'll have a headset on and they're talking, and it's a subtle difference, right? They're both totally epic shows, but the attention capture of the South American performers is just on another level because people actually stay. Oh, I really wish I knew how to articulate this better because it's pretty much at the foundation of understanding if performing is for you. But basically, when you spin, pay attention to how long people watch. If it's more than the average attention span for like a short form video, such as 10 seconds, if they stick around for 30 seconds, you're on your track to being a flow arts performer. If they glance and walk away, like they do for me many times, you're not really destined to be a flow arts performer. You can change this. You can absolutely look up moves that are more exuberant and you can take notes. I'm just commenting on your natural aesthetic abilities and your natural ability to draw a crowd. You want people to be forming on a full 360 around you at music festivals or on the street if you're busking. If it's just 1 or 2 people, that means that your performance is more of a niche performance and it would do better online, likely than it would on a stage. That mainstream appeal to keep people's attention is very hard to curate. Oftentimes it's something you have or you don't, but it is possible to curate. So let's move on to section 2 and we'll talk about that. The second sign that you have what it takes is that people really enjoy your music selection. I've seen amazing skills totally ruined by the wrong song selection. And at the core of it, the performer is curating an emotional story or experience for the audience. And what they're doing is they're able to make everyone in the audience feel the same emotions at the same time. Happy, sad, confused, angry, whatever emotion the artist chooses to explore, they're able to take everyone along for the journey. It's really underrated when it comes to capturing the audience attention. Most people understand inherently that you should pick certain types of songs, but they don't actually like split test it and go see if their performance matches it. I've seen some amazing performances that even used a trending song, but the song itself was very repetitive. And all the emotions that the performer felt making the act and executing the act were super flat. There was not an emotional arc. And audiences do like tech, but what they really like is tech in the context of emotional catharsis or like a really intense emotional experience where they reach a peak and almost make like major life decisions based on their emotions and then come back down. So, for example, there are some performers in Portland, Johnny Nuriel and Isaiah. They make everybody feel anticipation, elation, risk, they're impressed, and then they all laugh at the same punchlines. They have a series of buildups and drops that match the music and match their facial expression while they're doing dance and flow arts tech. And you absolutely can train to reach that kind of level, but it involves training from outside of the community. You would actually have to hire like a burlesque teacher or a dance teacher. This means that your natural propensity to go into and stay in the flow arts community will not lead you to reach the level of performing that a dancer or a burlesque performer would. All that is to say, over the course of time, investing in outside influences is what is required to be the kind of performer that can create an emotional experience. Flow arts instructors do not teach the emotional arc needed for a good performance. Now, I have seen some clowning classes at flow festivals. That is an absolutely incredible start, but not everybody is destined to be a clown. Clowns are more interactive, mimes, and like typically they're more silly and they're more absurd. But what I'm talking about are the performances that are like emotionally moving without relying on like cheap humor or gimmick props. In other words, if you naturally know how to elicit strong emotions from people through conversation, maybe you write music, maybe you write emotional Facebook posts, maybe when you dance, they just can't blink or look away because you have so much soul in your body. That is the sign, right? Your music selection is an indicator of that. Some really simple tests, right? A litmus test for you is when you go to a party, if someone passes you the aux cord and everybody likes your music, that's a sign you're going to be a good flow arts performer. It means you know how to read the crowd and play the right song. Now, I've been a DJ for like 5 years now, and this is a skill that still eludes me because I do a lot of school dances where the kids are predominantly sober and the song selection has immediate feedback. So reading the crowd is something I've been developing for years. Even though I naturally have a propensity for it, I still have to hone that craft and hone my attunement to the energy level of the crowd, which you will see is another topic in this video. So before I move on to number 3, in conclusion, when it comes to the emotional experience, what you have to understand is that your first couple stage acts will not have this emotional, let's call it a roller coaster. Your first couple stage acts will be predominantly about spinning things in circles, and people won't feel anything. So you kind of have to push through that first stage fright and get your stage laps in. I'll share my story, which was in Florida. I was doing acts to a song that I thought was cool, but that the promoters thought was not so good. They also thought it was too long, and the flames were getting small, and there wasn't a whole lot of like leg movement. It was all arm movement. And I remember looking out at the crowd, and the kids were like watching attentively and trying to be polite, but it was on the beach, and they were just playing with sand, and they were playing with like tiki toys and stuff. And I thought to myself, man, I thought I was doing cool tech. Over time, I developed that act into a more interactive and shorter one with bigger flames, causing more emotion. I stopped paying attention to how they reacted to a flower, some cool tech or a cool toss, and I started paying attention to more if their eyes got big when my big exuberant body motions matched the drop of the music. So it's a skill you can't really work until you get the base level of stagecraft or stage performance. So don't give up in your first year or two. I would say give it 3 to 5 gigs where you just master the movement and you don't hold yourself to a high standard for emotional attunement. You know that you have that as a goal, but it can take a year or two, and that's okay. As long as you know that's your ultimate goal, then you have what it takes. So let's look at topic 3, which is when you don't practice until you get it right, you practice until you don't get it wrong. Actually, now that I think about it, another lesson from Johnny and Ariel in Portland. The beauty of this one is that it's a psychology concept called deliberate practice, developed by the psychologist Anders Ericsson. I like the phrase, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. In other words, you are so dedicated to getting your act down that you really just work on the act. Like if you're like me and you go to the gym to practice, you practice it over and over and over again. It looks really weird to people watching because especially when you're like rerunning the intro couple moves to get it clean, it's gonna look like you're stuck in a loop doing the same strange moves, especially if those moves have a bunch of like exuberant movements or like a hair flip or some type of sassy look. Um, it's going to look silly, and you're willing to push through that discomfort of people watching you drill this silly intro until you get it right. So deliberate practice means focusing on consistency, error reduction, and precision. The difference is that beginners practice until they can get a trick right once, but performers practice until they don't get it wrong because the stage is unpredictable. The lights are bright, the crowds are loud, your adrenaline is high, and you don't rise to the level of your expectations, you fall to the level of your training. So, really good performers will even practice in the wind. They'll practice facing into the wind and with the wind at their back so that no matter where they wind up, they can still nail all their tricks. They'll practice with like a variety of different props so that they get to know the body movement, not just the prop movement. I've seen performers who practice their act a lot of times and they were okay with a couple drops. And to me, that indicates, and this includes me actually sometimes, that indicates that they're not actually truly destined to be a total professional performer. They're more of an amateur. And in life, a lot of happiness comes from setting our expectations. So, since a lot of flow artists don't have a strong career going and they don't have a lot of like prospects to make money, they envision a life where they're a professional performer based on their tech skill, but they don't freaking practice dropless acts. They do, let's say, 10 run throughs a day. I'm not kidding you. It can take 50 a day. It can be like a 4 to 5 hour session of just practicing it. And unfortunately, because in the modern world, our focus and attention is so splintered and shattered, most people can't handle that. If you're willing to push through the discomfort of starting over and over and over, you are destined to be a performer. On that note, I've seen a lot of really good performers who do the same act a lot of times because they know they can do it dropless. This is kind of a gray area. I personally like to do new acts a lot. I think it's more fun. And since I'm performing at the same venue, Dante's, I want them to get to see me do new acts. It's just my ADHD coming out. So I do have drops in my act a lot, but I have also done some dropless acts like 3 or 4 times in a row. So pretty much from January all the way through midsummer, I did the same act. And I know it's the same act. The crowd forgets or they notice new parts of it. They don't really care. It's all up in the air. It's really hard to tell at a bar what people are going to remember. But as far as my relationship to myself, I like to try to do new acts a lot, which means there's going to be drops, which means I am an amateur performer, not a professional one. I would say a good ratio is 19 out of 20 attempts. If you drop once out of 20 times, that's pretty good. That's proficiency. But if you drop 1 out of 10 times, that means you're probably going to drop on stage. And if you're the kind of person who wants to be known for a dropless act, that means you're destined for something at the Cirque du Soleil level because they shoot for dropless. If you shoot for something that shows, for the most part, the patterns you can do with a couple drops, that's amateur level. And that's totally okay as well. They're both valid. I will say the folks who can do complex acts with no tangles, drops, or like bonks, as I call it, and no messed up footwork, those folks put in an order of magnitude more hours of practice than those at the amateur level. Perhaps you would say amateur is 90% good and then professional is 100% good. It doesn't take 10% more time to get 10% better as a performer. It takes like 100% more time. It takes, let's say it takes 9 hours to get 90% good. It doesn't take 10 hours to get 100% good. It takes like 100, specifically because of the transitions between patterns. That's the real sauce of a good performance. is you don't just do a bunch of patterns in a row. And I'm a pattern performer, so I know this deeply. You practice the patterns in isolation, and then you practice the transitions between patterns in isolation so that you know exactly how to flow from one aesthetic to the other. The really good performers somehow find creative ways to go from big open flowers to small tech. They don't have to like collect and then start the next pattern in between. They also have very little wasted time and very few extra beats, like downswings of the prop, in between patterns. This is practicing until you don't get it wrong. This is where you practice so many times that you find transitions that no one else has done yet, and you practice them. So, overall, ask yourself this: are you willing to put in an order of magnitude more time to create a perfect act, or would you rather just have it be a regular one? I've done both. And I got to say, at this point, since I have other stuff in my life, I shoot for the amateur level one. It often gets the same results and it allows me to be free to practice other things. But when I want to do like a professional act, like in a competition or something, it's 50 to 100 hours of coming up with and practicing that act. I mean, it's months of practice and it's the same. Honestly, I do like 10 patterns per act and then a couple transitions between them and a little couple elements of burlesque. That's another thing, is practicing in your costume. I mean, it is cringe to practice putting on and taking off like tearaway pants, or to practice putting on and taking off a jacket if that's part of your act. But that's what it takes. And ask yourself, are you willing to put in the extra time to be one of the best? Most of us are not, and that's totally okay. So I combined topics 3 and 4, which was practicing until you don't get it wrong, and transitions. So now I'm going to jump right into the 5th and final topic, which is that you enjoy supporting other artists. You cannot be part of an arts community, a performing arts community in particular, comprised of variety shows and galas, without supporting other artists. I've seen really talented artists who kind of like backstabbed and gossiped and never offered to help, never showed up early, and never stayed for other artists' acts, and never cheered for them, never took photos, never tagged them online. And social cohesion is more important than sick tech skills. Why is this? Because in a liberal arts community, a lot of times we feel very isolated. And when we come together, those micro moments in the green room or tagging each other online, those validate and create a far more cohesive feel, which is kind of the point of art anyway, is to connect with other people. Yes, you're showing off to get credibility for yourself, but you're also creating a shared emotional experience where we all agree on a topic, whether it's stoicism's good, exuberance is good, flexibility is good, strength is good, precision is good. We all feel the same thing at the same time. And if you don't prove to others that you're willing to go through the same emotional journey as them, you're just going to be remembered as shapes in the air. You're not going to be remembered as a human participating in the community, act, or the community like service. So I always say, show up early to help carry things, bring a tripod and let other people use it to film, bring snacks and things like that. And in general, be seen supporting other artists. Because of the concept of reciprocity, we naturally want to support those who support us. And it doesn't take that much effort to cheer for someone, film for them, carry their stuff, safety for them, support them, let them borrow some equipment. It's minimum effort, but maximum impact. And inherently, performers know that to get support from others, you often first have to show it. It's kind of like respect. If you want someone to respect you, you have to show them respect first. And there's this weird ego in the flow arts world that I think it's probably in every community, but 1 out of 10 really skilled artists doesn't want to be seen like cheering for beginners, or doesn't want to be seen physically helping. They have this kind of superiority complex where they need to only be seen doing their act and keep this air of mystery, and they only cheer for the absolute best. And furthermore, they don't support other people online. They only support elite artists through likes and comments and shares and things like that. Well, what I've realized is really effective performers have a bunch of people in the audience that they've already connected with, whether that's through lessons, jokes, hanging out, or just supporting them in their art. And that's something that I've always striven to do is to support people on their journey who are clearly leveling up and clearly trying really hard. Maybe they look up to me from a technical level, but maybe I look up to them from a social level or a career level or a spiritual level. Really good performers understand that they have honed their particular craft. Let's say it's three poi, this nerdy thing that only they do. But all those other people have honed things to that level, skills to that level, that we can look up to each other. And I'm not saying you can't be a good performer if you're very isolated and you don't support other people, but it makes it way harder. You have to be so freaking good that you just blow people's minds with your emotionality and your musicality and your technical skill. But amateur performers who are ready to go to the professional level have an entire crowd full of people like really cheering for them as a human as opposed to just as a technically skilled performer. Now, a lot of these are blending together. You may be wondering, like, well, that's not really a good performance because a good performer can't afford to go connect with a bunch of other people before every act. Like they're traveling a lot and they're in front of a new crowd every couple nights. This is true. But in the very early stages, which is what we're talking about today, we're talking about determining if you're going to be a good performer. And good performers often, real recognize real. They recognize other good acts because no matter what prop is in the performer's hand, whether it's a hoop, a dragon, poi, or a freaking beach ball, who cares? The goal is not to showcase technical skill. It's to make the audience feel something about the technical skill or about the clowning or about the lyrics. So a good performer can create an emotional experience with anything. And I just feel bad for the really skilled people who don't understand this early on. That's why I made this video. I want you to understand that connecting emotionally, whether it's you're on stage and they're in the audience or you're both just in the hallway or in the green room, that's what being a good performer is about. It's about creating emotional arcs for the audience, whether that's on stage or off. It all leads to the same thing, which is your ability to make the audience feel something. So I just kind of wanted to recap. We're running a little bit long on time. I wanted this to be a shorter video. So musicality, connecting with the stage, and practicing until you don't get it wrong. If you're already doing these, you're on the right track. There's a couple other honorable mentions, like you buy really big fire and pixelated props. You really like costuming. You like doing makeup. You enjoy travel. You enjoy making like professional looking invoices and outgoing emails to book gigs. There's a lot more that goes into it, but these were the ones that were really on my mind because there's a big difference between being a amateur and a professional, and people hit amateur because they don't know the social requirements to hit professional. It takes a lot of support to go from amateur to professional, and a lot of like critical feedback and a lot of borrowing props and borrowing costumes and help trimming your music to make it shorter and help doing your makeup, touching it up right before the show. All these are socially enacted. They are not done by training in the gym by yourself. And let's look at Cirque du Soleil, for example. Like those performers are probably super tight with each other because they know that it takes a lot of people to put on a show. Just them being skilled at juggling or contortion is not going to carry the show. Them having a cohesive bond with all those people they're traveling and performing with day in and day out is way more important. The technical skill is required, but the effort put into remaining a cohesive unit emotionally, spiritually, and I don't know, financially, like that is the true skill. And I'm sad that there's so many technically skilled people with flow arts that think it's just about spinning things in circles. I hope you agree with me. I understand that if you're the devil's advocate, you'd say if you're talented enough, the world will put you on. And that is true in some cases, but it's way more common for an amateur to level up like massively with the support of a crowd. And the way you do that is by showing them support and by picking music that everyone's going to like. Does that mean sacrificing a little bit of your personality to create a connection? Yes, absolutely. As humans, you always have to sacrifice your own selfish preferences to create a community, emotional roller coaster and a community vibe. What are your thoughts? I want to know what you think. Like, what were some of the signs that you knew you were destined to perform? And what were some of the signs that you saw in other people where you're like, that guy knows how to pick music. That guy knows how to make a costume. That guy knew how to make me feel happy and sad in the span of 3 minutes. I'm really curious because this list took me a while. And even though I know it's not fully complete, I think it covers 80% of the signs you can tell if someone's going to be a good performer. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. I'll see you in the next one.